Here's what I'm discovering as I investigate people's brains. After 48 hours, regardless of how brilliant a piece of communication is, especially in B2B, people
Right.
will forget 90%, sometimes even more, of that content after 48 hours. And
Yeah.
the little that stays there across time, let's refer to it as a metaphorical 10%, because sometimes people may remember slightly more, hardly ever. But there may be that occasion where it goes a little bit above 10%, quite often is way below. That metaphorical 10% message tends to stay there, but quite often is random. So, for instance, for you and I to be practicing what we're preaching, one of the most important guidelines we have to abide by is to say, do we have a clear 10% message for this
Mm,
segment? So our
mm.
theme, let's choose that one. Let's just say control your 10% will be our theme for this podcast. And there is no secret, repetition is the mother of memory. So the moment that we have clarified our main thing for people to remember, and then we come back to that again and again and again and again. And ideally, that message is also distinct from other things people may have seen or heard before. So obviously, an element of distinctiveness can also play a role. If we have that combination, then we can be in better control of what people say after 2 days. So if you had the courage in 48 hours after you release this episode to ask your audience, what did you take away from that podcast? Ideally, their answer matches our intent. So let's take that on as a challenge. So if you
Yeah.
say control your 10% after 48 hours, then we have done our job correctly.
Yeah. I love that. Control the 10%.
Yes.
It also feeds specifically into the type of work that I do, Carmen, where I'm a brand strategist by trade. And part of the process in which we make people and companies go through is the positioning exercise, which is literally cutting off,
Yes.
taking away all these things that you want to say that you feel like you have to be known for.
Yes.
And then you're left with one idea
Yes.
that you repeat again and again and again and again. Because oftentimes, like you said, we're just gonna, oh, we want to be this and we also want to be that, but don't forget about this. We just keep
Mhm.
adding things
Mhm.
to that soup until it's so unrecognizable. And of course, it turns into this brown color, which is when you mix all these colors
Yeah.
together.
It's so true, and people are lucky to be connected to you because you already have this mindset. So, as a
Mm,
practical guideline, as people are listening to us, when they reflect on their own content or processes or anything else that is important to them and they want to become memorable, always ask the question, what is my 10%? To control something, to control the 10%, you have to clarify it first. Quite often, people will say to me, well, we want to be memorable. But not that often people know what they want to be memorable for. And just to release the pressure, you don't always have to be memorable. Like, let's start there also. Because people remembered everything you said or did. You could not have customers, you could not have spouses. You would be in a lot of trouble if you're that memorable. So pick your battles.
right.
Those instances will come to your life where you'll say, I really want people to take this away, insist on those, and be very grateful that the brain does forget at some point.
Oh, I like that so much because that also means, yeah, we're not here to make sure that 100% of the time
Yes.
you are controlling what people remember 10% of the time. We're not here to say everything that you say have to be memorable. I think that's really important, Carmen, because I feel like there's a very high bar or people feel very scared to whether it's put out content or, make mistakes or do any of that sort of brand work because they are afraid that people remember their flaws or yeah, or things that they do sort of wrong, especially in the digital world where you feel like, oh, everything is going to be publicly logged forever. I mean, somewhat it's true, but people might not remember that.
So you can rest peacefully at night because quite often you give more attention and memory space to some things that may have been important to you, or you're feeling self conscious about, or you're ruminating and you're thinking, maybe I shouldn't have said this, maybe I shouldn't have that. Memory and forgetting are part of the same coin, and thank goodness for that because we couldn't evolve. Imagine even your own ego or sense of self could not evolve unless you forgot some things. Quite
Right.
often, memory is selective. So, in order for you to even walk around without being anxious or depressed all the time, you have to suppress some memories and selectively focus only on those that at some point will serve you well. Your customers are not going to be any different. We can debunk
Right.
another myth too, or another mindset, which is, well, if people only remember the 10%, then let's just only give them that and forget the 90.
Mm,
And that doesn't work because the 90 must be used in service of the 10%. That 10% message wouldn't survive unless it has some substance in the background. So, as another practical guideline, as you're reflecting on your own content, to control your 10%, you clarify it. And then you ask the question of the 90, is this in service of the 10? Because otherwise, I'm seeing so much randomness in that 90 and people are forgetting to come back home. They forget to come back to that one main message that really must survive. So use the 90 in service of the 10.
right. What you're saying is, Howie, don't talk about things that have nothing to do
Yes.
with this control your 10% on this episode because it's like if it's not in service of this message, what are we doing? Basically, you're just taking attention away from what's needed.
Exactly.
Jokes aside, I think it's worthwhile for listeners to have a basic understanding, Carmen, about how does memory form? Like, why is it that we have these memories? What is it here to do for us? Just to have a basic foundation. You started talking about remembering and forgetting
Mhm.
are two sides of the same coin. I would love to hear more about memory and why it serves us.
Yeah, let's think about this because it is a profound question. It is a question that defines us because consider this thing. If you lose your memories right now, since memories are a database of self, you literally are then struggling because yourself is not there anymore. This is why for those terrible diseases like Alzheimer's, for instance,
Right.
for
Dementia. Right.
exactly that those come with the tragedy of having lost your memories. And luckily the brain doesn't just have one memory system. We have multiple memory systems, which is why even in patients with Alzheimer's, some things are still preserved. Like for example, your procedural memories, things that you do with your body, like playing an instrument, for example, things that would require a lot more movement, physical movement. Those are stored in some systems versus your memories of facts, like knowing that Paris is the capital of France belongs to one memory system versus what you did in Paris that one summer and the stories that you may have created there, your episodic memory, autobiographical memories, those belong to another system yet. And there are many more, for example. There are some memories that you can't even put into words. These memories that we're talking about, explaining facts or sharing stories or procedural things, those you can explain in words. But there are some that you can't really put into words, like even some of your procedural things. If somebody asked you to describe in detail how you ride your bicycle, at some point you
Mm,
might be falling off the bicycle because those are things are not meant to be put into words. There is this one mechanism called priming that I think your listeners could benefit from. Priming means getting the brain in a ready state and showing it a stimulus so that it can process the next stimulus in a different way. For example, if some people walked up in your room right now and I gave them a hot cup of coffee to hold in their hands, and then I would say, describe your personality, they would be more likely to describe you as warm compared to if I had given them iced cups of coffees to hold in their hands. So you see, I'm using one stimulus to influence how the next stimulus is being processed. And I think that's a system that is underutilized in business content, even though it belongs to an implicit way of building memories, because you're not really that much aware that this is happening. It's underutilized. And sometimes if we say, okay, control your 10%, you clarified it, you repeat it quite often, just as often look to see what just happened in somebody's brain right before you reinforce your 10% message. Can you prime it? How do you prime it? Well, can you show something that's a bit more emotionally intense? Can you show something that linguistically is not quite often all that easily recognized? I just saw an ad campaign from Nike that said, don't Monday it. Monday, like the day of the
mm,
week. And
right.
because Monday is now a verb, and you don't really use it as a verb, the moment that somebody says, don't Monday, you see how your attention is peaked. So then if I have a 10% message to show you after that, because you're now in a heightened state of attention, you're more likely to be prepared again for that 10% message. Quite often, by the way, people forget because they're not in a state of even being ready to remember. So often ask, are my audiences even ready for this message?
How do you get them to be ready? What are the ways in which you found, Carmen, to get people to be ready to listen to something?
Yeah, that ready state and the priming mechanism can be such an inventory of right techniques. So we are talking about, for instance, emotional priming. Sometimes in business content, especially, we stay also serious or so close to reality. Like imagine what happens in business content when you have the courage to deviate from reality and to just even ignore accuracy just for one moment. I remember seeing a campaign from that brand Hermes. Are you familiar with the luxury
Yeah.
brand?
Yeah.
They were showing, I mean, obviously, what did they advertise? They advertise some shoes or some cosmetics of sorts,
Bags.
bags. Yeah. And those are so predictable. So now they have to get the brain in a ready state to even process an otherwise fairly cliche message that we have seen from many other brands. And in this one campaign, they were showing an elephant that was wearing the pink shoes. And not only was this elephant wearing their shoes, but its toenails were painted in the same color as the shoes and perhaps one of the scarves. So scarves and shoes and lipstick we see quite often, but an elephant with painted nails is not something that you see that often. So exaggeration can create that stronger emotion. And the moment that you have a stronger emotion, you have a stronger electrochemical signal in somebody else's brain. So as you investigate your own content right before the 10% message, do you have an opportunity or can you create an opportunity for a stronger emotion?
That's super interesting. How do you look at the difference between the priming message and then the main message? Let's say if the priming message is a little bit exaggerated,
Yes.
then what does the main message have to be so that A plus B, you get something greater, as opposed to maybe
Yes.
negating them? How do you see that? How do you piece that together?
I like where you're going already. I'll give you an example from some content that we were designing for a client just recently. And this was a fairly complex project. The company that we are building this message and the visuals for is in the construction space. And they were bidding for this project where the brand Louis Vuitton, are you familiar with that brand?
Mm-hmm.
They are coming to Beverly Hills to build not one, but two buildings. And where in Beverly Hills, but on Rodeo Drive. And for these buildings, because the brand is iconic in itself, they wanted to use an iconic architecture firm. You may have heard of this architect, Frank Gehry. Unfortunately,
Of course.
he just
Right. He
passed
just
away.
passed.
Unfortunately, 3 weeks, December 5th is when he unfortunately died. But he lived to be in his 90s and very much involved up to an older age. His sons are now taking over the business. So that influence that they brought to architecture, which is, oh, here's this giant fish that just came out of the sea and suddenly it's not a fish anymore, it's a museum. Or he did with steel something that people never thought that steel was capable of bending.
Right.
Like there's not
Yeah.
a 90-degree angle in a Frank
Yeah.
Gehry architecture. You're familiar.
I am. I actually went to at Case Western. I went to school at Case Western in Cleveland. He designed a business school building,
Yeah.
which was like that. There was no 90-degree
Yes.
angles in the entire building, which is so fascinating and what a nightmare for furniture
Yeah,
to be placed.
exactly. And for the construction firm to now be given these designs and to say, make this a reality.
Right, make this work.
So now
Right.
for the point of view of this construction company, you know that you're bidding for a project where the location is iconic, where the architecture firm has already been selected, and what they will give you to build is not going to be an easy task. The presentation of what you can bring to the table has to be the strongest. So the 10% message that we came up with was build like the world is watching. By the way, as you control your 10% message, here is another practical guideline. phrase it as a verb, tell the brain what it can do with what you offer, not just the features and capabilities that you have. So in this case, it was build like the world is watching, because in this case, it will be. So for the next 3 years on Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills, every person who's in fashion, who's in architecture, who's a structural engineer, they will want to know how these designs are going to come to life. So how did we prime this 10% message? Because I can just come up and say, Bill, like the world is watching.
Right. Right.
Very first image that Louis Vuitton saw in that presentation from the construction company was this crane that was above a construction site. Construction sites are hardly ever pretty. But imagine that when a crane is present on a construction site, as the sun hits the upright piece, it casts a shadow on the construction site. So the shadow of the crane was no longer this predictable crane, but it was a fashion model as she's walking on a runway. So there is that stronger emotion, that stronger priming of, ooh, I didn't expect that. And the main title slide had this unusual image with the unusual shadow. And the message said, every move matters. So already we're building this thing is like, oh yeah, it will, because everyone is going to be with their eyes on you.
And I bet they're all nodding their heads. They're all
Yes,
like,
every move matters. And the presenter's words are something like this. We are very excited to be part of this project because we will be building for an iconic brand that defines excellence in an area that defines luxury, with an architecture firm that defies geometry. Because of this, every move matters. And when we know this, click, we will build like the world is watching. That was a 10% message. So this is a longer way to answer your very short question. How do you combine priming plus a 10% message? Look to see what is that stronger emotion, plus the words sometimes, that can get the brain in a ready state. It's like, ooh, yes, every move will matter. So that's a precedent. And because of that state, then the 10% message really comes as a relief, as a promise that we will get you there.
Build like the world is watching. Isn't that such a great line? The thing is this, though, when you hear that, it seems really simple. It seems, wow, that's so cool. But I've been in processes like these before. It's not just coming up with that creative line and idea. The hardest part is getting leaders not to pile in and add in stuff, because our natural desire is to add more things. Is, hey, what about this that we're not talking about? What about that? Is to add all these different things into a message, then becomes very convoluted. So the feat is actually being able to remove things and focus on one specific thing. And that's what I do with my clients. So when I work with them, it's first of all getting a very strong foundation in understanding what is the one unique person that they want to help, the problem that's the most urgent, the one problem that they truly uniquely can solve, and the one superpower, the passionate power that they have that they want to lean into and use day after day after day. I have a free resource for you. It's a masterclass about nailing that niche, designing a game that you can win. So go click on the link in the description on the show notes. And I tell you, if you don't have that 10% message, like what Carmen is trying to tell us, we're just not going to be remembered. And if we aren't remembered, then we won't get the opportunities, because 95% of buyers are not looking to buy something right now. So you need to be able to be sticky so that they will give you and choose you when that opportunity shows up. All right, now back to Carmen. As she will share, it's not just about knowing what to say, but there are other things that you can do to make that 10% message more sticky.
What's the 10%? And associate that with an action that it's not you who's doing the action, it's the action that your customer can do, and only with you. If we were to look at the competition could not claim the same thing, because obviously what happens next, that 10% message has some supporting points, because you can make all these claims and bring all the actions and the rewards. The world will be watching, so we'll be there to give them something good to see. And by the way, I recommend no more than 3 or 4 supporting points to your 10% message. not because the brain is not capable to remember more, but if you give it more, you're associating your message with something that is effortful to retrieve. I'll say this again because this is so important. We have a message right now at point A. We hope that people remember that 10% message because we control it at point B. But at point B, that brain is going to have to retrieve the memories. Do those memories come easily to mind, or do people have to work for that retrieval? We call this in neuroscience cognitive ease. So you can reach cognitive ease a lot more easily with 3 or 4 supporting points versus a huge list of supporting points. So in this case, the supporting points are around, we are going to have a construction site that is going to be prepared even before we step foot on the construction site, because there's so much that has to happen before you even start digging in the ground. And because of Frank Gehry designs, there is so much modeling that has to happen. So you have to prep before the construction even begins. That was point 1. Point 2 is as the construction begins, you have to synchronize every step, because remember, it's not 1 building, but 2. So it's not like you can leave a crane, for instance, forever on Rodeo Drive. Those phases will have to happen so much in parallel and so much synchronization that you don't disrupt too much. And then point 3 was around protecting your brand in motion, because you have the Louis Vuittons of the world, you have the Frank Gehry's of the world. You bring in a construction company, now you're taking on those iconic brands. You have to be a brand ambassador. Like, you cannot afford to not do justice to who they are. So the promise was that we will protect your brand in motion. So think about your supporting points that always come back to that 10% message. Because of these 3 or 4 things, of course, we will build like the world is watching.
Carmen, you said something I think really important, which is the retrieval part of it. So
Yes.
making a memory is part A, and then part B is the retrieval.
Yes.
What are the other things that people could do to make the retrieval that much easier?
Before even retrieval, we have to think about what happens in between, because you have point A, and let's call that encoding. So you're enabling somebody else's brain to encode your memories, to encode that 10% message. And then point B, you retrieve it. In between, there's some consolidation time. So for instance, as people are listening to us, let's just say that you had a presentation for a customer. And then what do some people do is like let's take these customers out for like a really nice dinner and some time around the town. And now it's 10 o'clock, and then let's have another drink. And now it's 1 a.m. And then maybe we just go back to our hotel rooms by 3 and we've had a really good time. But keep this in mind, sleep is what helps consolidate our memories. So sometimes if you're really after the 10% message being consolidated and you're not after the relationship being consolidated, then allow people to sleep a little bit extra so that those things solidify, have a chance to solidify.
CFOs will love to hear this, Carmen.
Yes, exactly. Save some time on that wine, some money on that wine. But this is where, if we go back to what we discussed in the beginning, if we said not everything has to be memorable, and if you're after people remembering a good time and that's all you want, then that dinner could be important. But if there are some words that will distinguish you from competition and allow people to like literally and physically sleep on it. And
Right.
just even a principle in physics, I'm working on a new book right now, and in the beginning chapter, I reflect this physics principle. If 2 things are not distinctive from one another, that one thing that's not distinct does not exist physically. So you want to go after some distinctiveness. You want to control your 10% message, because that's what really like literally brings you into existence. So at point B, what else can you do in terms of retrieval? One other thing you can ponder is what really triggers your memory. We were working with a company the other day, and their main message was about the intelligent communication fabric. This is a telecom space. The phrase itself is a bit unusual. Unless you are in that space, you may not necessarily understand what that fully is. But then you have to think, do people really go back to their desks and just out of the blue that like suddenly they will come up with that message? Hardly ever does that happen. You would have to be so vested already in that message for you to initiate the retrieval. Usually what happens, you sit around your desk and you see something, and that is what says to your brain, this reminds me. that phrase can be a very good opportunity for all of you to think, what could be some triggers at point?
Mm-hmm.
And then build those already at point A. So, for example, we're working with a company in the compliance and governance space, one of the least sexy spaces that you could ever be. Because you can't really say, like, I can't wait to talk about those governance processes.
But when you think of rules,
Yes.
remember us.
So this presentation was for a company that has a software application that then, for instance, boards or those CFOs that you're talking about and committees can use to keep their visible people in check, because quite often a board and a company will get themselves in trouble because they don't have these governance and the rules that you're mentioning in place. And we were bringing this message to life by using some very concrete examples. Like, for instance, the CEO of Lululemon got himself in trouble because he made some comments, which if there had been some governance processes, he would not have
Right.
made those comments. CEO of United Airlines got himself in trouble because he made some comments that he regretted. CEO of Boeing got himself in trouble because making
There's a pattern. There's a pattern here.
there's a pattern here. So the more that we are sharing those stories at point A, at point B, most business professionals, what do? They typically fly. So the moment that you're in an airplane, you might say, "Oh, this reminds me of that CEO who said something that he shouldn't have." Or if you're walking down the street and you may see a Lululemon or a fitness brand, it doesn't even have to be that brand, but something fitness related, which you're very likely surrounded by, you will say, "Oh, this reminds me." So as a practical guideline, when you control your 10%, wonder, can the 90% include some of these stories with cues that can then trigger memory and retrieval at point B?
That's a pro move right there, Carmen. Because I think most of the time I would hear advice, and as a brand person too, you would advise folks to be, all right, let's anchor these stories or this message to something distinctive of your brand.
Yes.
So that when you target them with ads later on, they see that same color, the logo, whatever, that gives back, those memories. But what you're saying is, oh, so smart, is to leverage maybe what's in their environment
Yes.
and then use that to trigger the message that you kind of, gave them in part A. Oh, that's
Exactly.
great.
Exactly. And it's a broader message, it's a bigger way of thinking. It's going to be a bit more effortful type of thinking, but the effort is worthwhile because that brings you into existence. That will give you a memory, and ideally you then associate it with something that's distinct. You are distinct, you exist.
I love that. I love that. So controlling your 10%, we talked about the encoding, and then there's the consolidation,
Yes.
and then the retrieval. What can help this even more? Because I think attention is also very important, and that's the latest book that you wrote about getting people's attention to even form that memory or to have a chance to form that memory in the first place. What do we need to know there?
I really like what you're asking because attention quite often paves the way to memory. I'm saying quite often because it is possible to still direct your gaze to something, but just because you look doesn't mean that you see. And sometimes just because you see still doesn't mean that you remember. But for most part, if you are able to get people to focus, you increase the chances of a memory to be formed.
And you need that, right? I mean, if you don't get the attention in the first place,
it's a lot
there's no
harder.
chance of you even being remembered, right?
Yeah. So true. Can you think of something that captured your attention lately, by the way, like you could not take your eyes off of it?
So one of the traditions in the past 4 years, maybe 5 years, that my wife and I have is every year at the end of the year at the local art museum, they play the British Ad Awards. So you basically go in and you watch 90 minutes of ads. And as a brand person, I love it, right? I love that. You can break it down. You can, think about that. So in December, we watch all these ads. So what I remember, which is very interesting, by the way, what I remember are a few ads, but one particularly memorable was actually something pretty negative. It's a PETA ad where they had this cartoon where it's an animated cartoon that showed the atrocities of how people treat animals, as livestock. But when I watched that, at the end of that ad, I thought, this is never going to change behavior because it literally made the status of people lower. Like it decreased your status. You watch it and be like, oh man, they hate us. How am I going to change anything? And you kind of, not think about it. But it was very memorable. It got my attention.
Yeah. And from that regard, there's still a plus, because what is an increased chance of doing something but science? Science, an increased
Right.
likelihood that something is going to happen. It's a lot less likely that something will happen unless a memory trace has been created. And in your case, one
Right.
has. And
Yeah.
then to create a memory trace, quite often you do need attention. And we can debunk a myth. And the myth says our attention span is shorter. Our attention span is not shorter.
Oh, so you got to say it against everybody's blaming TikTok and shorts and reels and whatever. Yes.
That you can link
I'd
to
love to hear
something
that.
else, which is our relationship to pleasure and going
Right,
through
right,
and
right.
scrolling
Dopamine.
so that you,
Dopamine hits.
yes, you can spike up a few chemicals that your brain finds very juicy. But in terms of attention, we do not have a short attention span. You don't even have to work in neuroscience to know this. All you have to do is look in the mirror, be very honest with yourself and the world when somebody asks, what's the longest amount of hours you have binge watched on a TV show?
Oh, right.
By the way,
Right.
what's your number? What have you been?
Number of hours?
Yes.
Well, it's hard because as a parent of young kids now, I don't have the luxury of a lot of hours. But I mean, you would go for hours. I mean,
Yeah.
you would. I mean, when I was younger, probably, yeah, maybe 6 hours,
There you
8
go.
hours. A long time. A long time.
And somebody listening to this would think 6 hours. That actually, it's kind of like on the amateur side. I've heard people, like, sometimes I ask that question in various presentations or workshops I deliver on neuroscience, and they'll ask that question, and people say, yeah, 12 hours went by and we were still watching that show. 24 hours on 24 is not an uncommon answer. But the point is, when you hear guidelines like human beings have the attention span of a goldfish,
Right.
it's, first of all, I would have loved to be part of that scientific study that showed the attention span of a goldfish, because that's kind of an intriguing, Right.
Right.
Like
Yes,
in the
yes.
neuroscience studies that I conduct, what do? I put EEG caps on people's scalps. They could be adopting the role of a buyer. Sometimes it's the role of a seller. And I capture an electroencephalogram signal on their chest. I have an electrode for an electrocardiogram signal. On their wrist and fingers, I use a device that's called the GSR, a galvanic skin response. The reason for it is because when you're watching that PETA ad, for instance, that you're telling me about, and you have a
Yeah.
reaction to it, doesn't matter if it's positive or negative, but a reaction nonetheless, your skin physically changes. So we capture that. And then if it's a digital stimulus or a physical stimulus, we use either the actual eye tracking glasses, or on the computer itself, there's an eye tracker. So those are the 4 signals that I capture. Through the eye tracking, by the way, I capture visual attention. And the reason for it is because there is a connection between visual attention and cognitive processing. Typically, you look to where you think. So that's why I was asking, what captured your attention, something that you're looking. Since you're talking about animals, I remember a recent ad from Apple. Have you seen the one where there's a couple in a room and it's a very moody atmosphere, and the man looks at the woman, shows her the phone, and says, look, I was able to remove Garrett from this picture. Garrett being the and the woman doesn't even have to talk. Like, you can see her facial expressions just drop, because this cat is also part of the scene. He's not part of the picture anymore. And the ad was advertising the capability of removing objects with artificial intelligence from a photo. But there's just so much emotion.
Oh, yeah, we'll put a link in the show notes, yeah.
And use the link where the woman doesn't speak, because I think that ad is even stronger. But if people were using the eye tracking devices to watch that, I would be able to see what they're paying attention to first. What do they look at next? If overall in the entire ad, what do they look at the most compared to other elements that are not even taken into consideration? So if we were to convert some of these research in practical guidelines, what do we see? Be very humble. Just because you show something in your communication doesn't mean that people will look. Then we say, well, so how do we force them to look? How do we
Hmm.
make them look? The title of the book. Well, we can also go back to that priming effect. Is the stimulus itself a little bit more emotional or exaggerated than what people may expect? Because imagine if I have a phone or just any kind of device or software application, it has some features like this phone now can remove elements from photos. That's just the thing, is what exists. But how do we just create that in such a way that we say, now this is worthy of attention? Often some personal elements, like what the cat is to this woman, can you ask the question, what's really a few levels deeper that this is really about, or we can make this thing about? Pets usually are such part of a family. Find the feeling. That's the practical guideline. Sometimes we stay on the surface and we have the facts. Can you find the feeling behind what you offer?
Carmen, as you talk about this, I often feel like having people's faces are always great in ads because you can get a sense of how people are feeling. You can see what they're feeling, and we're animals where we mirror each other's feelings. However, when I think about, because I work in the healthcare industry a lot, so a lot of healthcare ads, they try to have a feeling, but you don't get any emotion because it's the same happy people walking on a beach or in a barbecue. Like it's all, you just always have that same, idea, and you don't get triggered to feel anything for it. Right? What's the discrepancy there? How can, perhaps the healthcare world fine tune a little bit some of these stories or these emotions that actually trigger something real?
I like where you're going because initially, when we saw that couple on the beach in a healthcare ad, very first company that would have used that, others would have looked at it and thought, hmm, that's an interesting way to approach this. We don't just have to show
Right.
the features of our drug, we can just show what our drugs do in real life. But then by the time we saw the 1 billion ad that found the same feeling, is like,
Right.
that loses its luster and its intensity.
It does.
Also, we have to be cautious about faces because what we would detect through the eye tracking devices in the neuroscience studies that I complete is this. Faces, we used to believe that they draw attention without any cognitive effort. Because from an evolutionary perspective, you have to look at someone's face to recognize friend or foe. Discovering more and more as these technologies advance for us to investigate the brain and the body is that actually processing faces comes with some cognitive effort. So you have to then ask the question, what's my ROA, the return on attention? The moment that I use a face, is it going to give me back something that's worthwhile? Like the ad with the woman and Garrett the cat. When you look at her facial expressions, that face is additive to the ad. I don't want to disclose it anymore because you will see it. Sometimes in some of these more cliche ads, those faces add absolutely nothing and they take things from
Right.
you. So not only am I not giving you something, but I'm extracting cognitive effort from you. So be very cautious if you are ever tempted for this clichéness of it all, the beach or the patients and nurses. I'm sure you've seen those kinds of images.
Hmm.
Um, can you go and still find something that is a feeling but more authentic? And sometimes you might be at the expense of not showing a face, but still showing a human component. There is a campaign that I'm seeing these days from California. We're talking about California earlier. California
Hmm.
Closets. Have you seen the more recent
No.
campaign from them? So
Mm-mm.
look for them and see how they very cleverly allude to a human authentic moment. Because just like healthcare, what do they say? You buy our products, your life is going to be better in some way. How is life better in some way when you have things organized? For example, in one of their ads, you're seeing this pristine floor. You're seeing a ball that the dog is chasing. But because the floor is very pristine, the ad then says, this no tripping hazard is brought to you by California Closets because you can put your shoes away, you can put other objects away, And now you don't have to trip. Even the dog is having an easy time with this. Or you can see a counter space that is just pristine and you only have a few cookies. And the ad says the reason you can enjoy these cookies is because all of your appliances are stored away. So we can infer a human component without showing humans.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting where we talk about cognitive ease, but there is some magic around giving a simple puzzle or a simple way for you to almost unlock a delight in an ad that makes it more memorable, makes it easier to recall because you put in that slightly more effort to figure out what's going on.
I like what you're saying a lot. And this degree of, let's call it desirable difficulty, can mean so much. So, as we're talking about controlling your 10%, we're saying make sure that the brain even pays attention. One way then to pay attention based on what you said is to invite some efforts, not too effortful because sometimes the brain is a cognitively lazy organ. It really doesn't want to go there. But you're so right because the moment that we even create that space for some engagement, sometimes we feel like giving people everything is just like 100%. Imagine a clothing line. If you fill it with 100% with all the clothes, then there is nowhere for the brain to meet you. Like leave a little bit of
Right.
open space. I was just in an art museum. You're talking about art museums. This was Honolulu. And there in one of the galleries, there is a Picasso. And the Picasso that is titled Pipe, Fan, and Glass. And you're looking at this cubist painting, but it's just like this mixture of objects that you can't really detect what they are because he has this talent of just flattening out everything that is
Right.
3D to
Abstracting out, right.
yes, whether it's not incomprehensible. And the museum, what does the museum do? It doesn't just title the painting, but it says, can you detect the fan, the pipe, and the glass? And now I'm just kind of observing in the corner of this gallery, and you see people are there by themselves or a couple. And now people are leaning in, and now they're actually looking because the invitation was there for engagement. It told you what to do. See, yeah, again, connect your 10% message with action. Tell the brain what to do. Can you find the fan, the glass, and the pipe?
I love that. And you'll probably remember it so much more if you indeed find it and you're like,
Yes,
oh my
yes.
God, look at this.
Exactly, exactly. I remember a Heinz commercial from a while back. Heinz said, draw what tomato sauce looks like in your imagination. And 9 out of 10 people who were given that assignment came up with the Heinz bottle. Very convenient. But at least they gave people something to do. It's like draw what tomato sauce looks like in your imagination. So can you, as you're listening to us, think of an activity that you can give your customers to do?
You know, the ability to find that balance between ease and effort is so wonderful and delightful once you find that magic spot. Before we move on, I want to really hone in on what Carmen just shared, which is something really important. Customers remember what they do, not just what they heard. And that's so fun when she talked about Heinz, for example, getting people to draw what ketchup looks like. So I want to use that too. For you, those who are listening in, I want to ask you this one question. What is your 10% message? If you were to list down 10 things about you that you want to leave people with, cross out 9 of those things. What is that one thing left behind? Because the truth is, when we interact with people, when we go to a networking event, we need to be intentional about what that one thing is. Because if not, when you ask 3 different people what you stand for, what they remember about you, there'll be 3 different versions of that. That means that it's all over the place. They don't really remember you or know you for something that you want them to. So be intentional. What are these 10 things? Cross out 9 things. What is that one thing that you want people to remember after 48 hours? And make that thing be something that helps the person that you interact with their future. Help them achieve something greater than where they are today. Because Carmen also says our memory doesn't serve us by remembering what's in the past. It actually serves us by remembering what will help us in the future. All right, go do that exercise. Find out what is your 10% message. Really record it down, write it down, and be intentional when you communicate next. Now back to the episode. Cameron, I do have to ask, you have a double PhD, right? Like one PhD is already, a lot of time, a lot of effort. You have two. Can you walk us through like your thought process? Like what was it imperative that you had to learn and be an expert on it? What was the journey to get you to that spot?
Well, here's the journey and something that anyone listening to us can benefit from. And that benefit is this. When I was doing the first doctorate degree, I was mainly focusing on IT and technology because I
Mm,
believed in what technology can do for us. And this is great. But then I recognized that technology is nothing without understanding the brain. So that's where the neuroscience focus came for the second one, and looking at the intersection of psychology and especially neuroscience, finding those brain areas in which psychological processes like attention and cognitive workload and motivation and fatigue, where do they actually happen in the brain? Now we have the technology
mhm,
to be able to do a lot more with that. And in your fields, anytime you have the courage to mesh technology plus psychology, you really open yourself up, because if you only focus on technology and facts and data, those typically tell you some binary answers, and they usually focus on the what. But it's the psychology and the neuroscience of it all that can reveal some of the whys. And that's where the more juice and creativity come from. So in your fields, as you're looking at your 10%, we're saying we're controlling it. Always, always look at this intersection between technology and the brain.
I always say, like the work that I do, the brand and sort of this sort of work, brand marketing psychology is never going to go away, because as long as humans exist, that we have to figure out how to influence others' behaviors. We have to work with each other. We have to be able to lead, work in teams, until, AI wipe us out. But in that case, why do we care anyway? But I feel like it's such an important skill for us to be able to influence and learn about human behavior.
It's so true. AI is here to stay, and at some point we would have to address that in our conversation. It's still the human brain that creates demand, at least for now. And the only way to keep the economy going, to keep capital going, in order to create more intelligent tools, you still have to appeal to the human brain that generates that demand. So always, always continue to learn about the human brain. What are you seeing, and what are your observations around AI and content for
Yeah.
brands?
It's interesting going back to the ad show that I was talking about, the ad awards.
Hmm.
What I have noticed in the ads that were award winning versus the previous years, there were a lot more highly intricate ads that involves like an animal doing something, or an animal adopting a human persona, doing some crazy thing. I saw like a walrus, it was driving a boat or something like that. I feel like AI has lowered the bar and the effort and the resources needed to create these extraordinary, exaggerated cinematographic stories. So I feel like much like what the world has seen in healthcare, which is like the first people that had happy smiley faces, and then suddenly every ad had happy smiley faces. I feel like there's gonna be this total flood of these type of ads that are exaggerated. At which point, then it's like going back to our conversation. What is the next creative
Yeah.
thing that advertisers or brand storytellers can do to again break away from the noise and what's current.
Hmm. The good news, based on what you're saying, is this. In order for the brain to detect your distinctiveness, which by now we're recognizing that takes a lot more effort, quite often human effort, it has
Hmm.
to perceive some similarity. The two go together, because how would you know that something is deviating from a pattern unless you can perceive the pattern?
A pattern, right, right, right.
Always embrace your competition and trends that are trying to get everyone to merge onto the same path, because the moment that everybody can detect that same path, that's when you have an opportunity to say, now we're zagging when everybody is zigging over here.
Yeah.
then you have to ask the question, okay, so now that we have the courage, to even have the courage to zag, what do we do? And I'm saying having the courage to deviate because I was just talking to somebody this morning. She was reflecting on this ice cream principle. And this ice cream principle apparently comes from some research that people did where they were sending 10 people to buy ice cream. And the idea was, what would it take to get all 10 people to agree to buy only one flavor of the ice cream? So knowing that that was the task and the people had to agree, what is the one flavor that they came back with?
Vanilla.
Yeah, exactly. So, so you see, you converge onto this common denominator that may not necessarily always serve us well. Not that much wrong with vanilla, but there are many other options out there. So that's why I was saying to even have the courage to
Yeah.
do you have what it takes to deviate from vanilla?
In the end, it comes back to, again, psychology and your ability to have courage. It is part of that, isn't it? Like, again, this morning I had a group of students where I was teaching them how to kind of niche down, find your niche, like take away things that you are not serving, right? Focus on that key market and your unique superpower. The first conversation was about how the student was afraid of doing that because it's like,
Yes.
oh man, my my friends are telling me why do a niche, why niche down? I'm gonna lose all these opportunities.
Yes.
I think there's an inherent fear in losing something. I mean, that's also loss aversion, right? It's just a natural human thing where we feel losses more than twice more than gains. I think it's just a psychological thing that we have that we're afraid to stand out. And it's evolutionary too, right? Isn't it, Carmen?
It's so true. And as you reflect on your messages, here we are talking about controlling the 10% and make sure you're in charge of what people take away. And distinctiveness is or could be one important part of what makes something memorable. To have the courage for something, you also have to have the energy for that something.
Mm,
And sometimes the reason why we may just stick with the vanilla of it all is because our own energy is not there. Then we ask the question, well, how do you develop more energy? And remember how we said not everything luckily has to be memorable? Well, for those things that you really want to make memorable, always ask the question, do I have enough chemistry with this message? So if I had to say it again and again and again, if I show up in front of that Louis Vuitton committee, do I see myself saying, "Build like the world is watching" 10 times, 20 times, 100
yeah.
times? And it's only when the answer is yes that you know you're on the right track, because a distinct message that you want to make memorable doesn't just happen once. You then have to go there again and again and again. Because, by the way, this is what will happen in your audience's brains. You'll say something, and then you'll say it again, and then you'll say it again, and then you'll say it again, and then you'll say it again. And maybe then they will notice it for the first time. So it's not just some repetition that will help you out, but it's a lot of repetition that you have to engage with because you already know your own patterns, but their brains haven't detected it yet. So you have to have not only courage, but a lot of energy and then chemistry with your 10% message to be there again and again.
Ah, that is so powerful, Carmen. That is absolutely powerful. I I I I feel like that is so true. I mean, it reminds me of bands, isn't it, with their hit songs. Like if you can't play that hit song with the same passion
Yes.
for 10 years, 20 years, 30, I mean, Journey is playing the same freaking songs
Yes.
for the past 40 years.
Yes.
If you can't do that, then maybe that's not the thing. Maybe that's not what you want to focus on for that 10%.
I remember somebody interviewed the person who played in what's the longest running Broadway show? It's
Oh my God.
The Phantom of
Is
the Opera.
that opera? Yeah, I was gonna
Yes.
say.
So the person who played in that at the time of the interview had played in the Phantom of the Opera 1,764 times. Now, if you're talking about repeating your 10% message quite a bit, that is quite a bit. So this journalist was saying, how are you even capable to withstand that much repetition again and again and again saying the same message? For him, it was a woman, because in the Phantom of the Opera, they were getting a new Christine, the woman
Mhm.
singer, every 2 weeks. So the
Mm.
novelty of a Christine is what kept him going. doesn't always have to be sexual. So for your 10% messages, ask where is the chemistry coming from? And if you just have that one inkling when you're looking at words or images and you know, I will take this on a first date, but I will not take it on a second date, then the chemistry is not there.
If you think about that, if it's something that excites you, um, there will be more and more nuance
Yes.
in that field that excites you. Part of like what you do, part of like what I do. The more you learn about it, then there's more of these little things. It's like, oh my God, this is new, this is novel. Even though if it's in this, small aperture, but it becomes very exciting to you, I find. Or even like saying the same message at different stages, different places, you know, virtually versus in person. There are a lot of different ways to make you excited about. But like you said, if you can't want to say that again and then again and again and again for so many times, maybe there's something else. Now, I have a question for you. With everything that you know around attention, about memory, about this core idea here about controlling your 10%, Carmen, how has that impacted your life and your decisions? What are some of the things that you feel like knowing what you know has changed what you do?
There's a good reminder in what you just said right now and the way that you phrase a question that will be very useful for our listeners and viewers, which is the only reason why we're even doing this is because memory influences decisions. Your audiences will only make decisions in your favor based on what they remember, not on what you forget. Sometimes in my workshops, I'll talk about attention and memory and then decisions as a linear path just for training purposes. Hardly ever do they happen in the brain in that conveniently linear fashion. Sometimes a decision will have already been formed in your brain, sometimes even subconsciously, and then looking for details to justify that decision that already is there and the memory for it is there. But quite often that process will unfold like this. And the reason it's been useful to me and it's going to be useful to any of our listeners is because the moment that you have created a memory on somebody else's brain, there's more chance for a decision. Sometimes it really makes my day. Just this morning, I had a conversation with somebody in Europe, and he said, "We would love to bring you back for one of those workshops that you do. And remember, we did that workshop about 12 years ago." So that is the benefit that all of you, as you're listening to this, can gain from this because you're in it not just for tomorrow, you're in it not just for next week, but you're in it for the long run. And for those moments where you really create memories that are long lasting, a decision in your favor can happen that far off in the future. And I'll offer another reminder that you'll find practical. We started the conversation with this, and you asked a very good question. What's memory and why do we even have it? A lot of times people talk about memory in a retrospective type of way, meaning that we remember the past. And that's true. We remember the past, but you have to ask the question, why is it really that remembering the past is also important? We have memories not so much to remember the past, but to remember the future. Prospective memory, which is remembering what to do next, that's what really is going to make a difference to your business because you want your audiences to remember to make decisions in your favor. And where do decisions live? They live in the future. They have to remember you at point B when decision time has come. That's why I like that you asked those questions. What should you do later on at point B so that now we are in the future? What's happening? So as you're listening to us, one other guideline you can consider is to say, decisions happen in the future. Can my materials paint that future for someone's brain? Because that means you're already taking me there. The future is the brain's preferred state, by the way. Yeah, we look to the past only to inform the future. The future is when we want to be. Because if we don't anticipate what will happen next and we can't simulate, we can't predict, we can't picture it, it's very likely that we might not be alive when it comes. The best future is one for which we are alive when it comes. So when you reflect on your 10% message and the 90 that supports it, paint a picture for what the future could look like for your audience's brains.
I'm very curious. So, what if, I'm sure clients have asked you this before, they want to pivot or move from what they're currently being remembered as
Hmm.
into a new thing, a new association that they want to have? Like what are some guidelines? What are some guidance that you would have? What are some missteps people make? Because I think over the past few years, we've all seen this, right? Whether it's Jaguar or whether it's Cracker Barrel. I mean, there are all these brands trying to find new audiences, trying to have new associations. What should they do and what should they not do?
I like that question a lot because we can link it to what we were just talking about in terms of prospective memory. If you're
Right.
pivoting, instead of linking so much to what the past was like, can we paint the future that is such a desirable state that we can't possibly even want to connect to some other past endeavor?
Mm,
Unfortunately, though, when people think, well, don't think of us like this, think of us this other way, that future is either not vivid enough or desirable enough where I'm willing to let go of all these other things. I'll tell you an experiment that I like a lot. This was happening in the 1940s at Berkeley.
mm.
I teach at Stanford once a quarter, so quoting Berkeley is a little bit of friction, but here we go.
People will forget. That's when the people will forget, Carmen.
They do some brilliant studies and research over there, but this is 1940s, and the scientist's name is Otto Tinklepaw. Imagine that being your name, by the way. So Mr. Tinklepaw would do this. He would take this monkey and put it in a small room, and in front of the monkey that was sitting on a chair, he would have these two cups, and underneath one of the cups, he would be hiding a piece of lettuce. And he was curious to see how long it would take the monkey to observe the hiding of this lettuce, which the monkey found desirable, wanted to eat the lettuce. How long would it take him to notice where it was hidden? He would then take the monkey out of the room. So then the monkey would come back into the room and go directly to where the lettuce was hidden. On
Mm.
average, it would take the monkey about 2 to 3 minutes to observe the hiding of the lettuce, go back out, come back in, find it. So he would repeat this experiment for about 2 months. And after the 2 months, Mr. Tinklepot did something fun. In one of the sessions, the monkey comes back into the room, and instead of finding the lettuce under one of the two cups, he now finds a banana. So now, given this thing between lettuce and banana, the monkey is like, oh, the life just got better. We pivoted to speak in your terms, in terms of the companies going for another thing. So he's
Right.
just all delighted because, by the way, contrary to popular belief, bananas are actually very rare in monkeys' habitats. Like when you find one, it's like really a treat. It's a reward. So then Mr. Tinklepaw switched to bananas for another 2 months. And after the other 2 months, in one of the sessions, he does something neat. The monkey comes back into the room, lifts up the cup, and this time, what does he find?
Nothing.
He finds a lettuce. And he's just,
Oh, so go from
yes,
banana
he goes,
to lettuce. So they would expect it's going to be
yes.
a banana, but it's lettuce.
Now it's lettuce. So we're going backwards. The monkey's all confused. He looks under the other cup. He's like, what am I losing my mind? Monkeys are very smart. He looks under the chairs. I would think maybe I missed something. He starts getting aggressive, first with the chair, then with the scientist. Then he leaves the room without touching the lettuce, which let's not forget, months before was highly
Love that.
desirable.
Right.
So as you're pivoting, there are many ways to do it. But one of the ways is to ask the question, did our rewards evolve with our audience's brains? Are we giving them lettuce when they expect bananas? Because one of the ways to get them to not focus here, but now focus over here, is that the reward is worthwhile enough.
Wow. What a great story. I mean, absolutely. I'm thinking about, yeah, any sort of pivot, like you said, any sort of rebrand effort. Are you giving them a more compelling future than what they have currently?
Mm.
And right, like, are you growing with them?
Yes.
That's important. That's absolutely important.
Yeah, rewards, we habituate to so many things very quickly. We habituate to stimulation. Like, for instance, if there is somebody mowing their lawn right now, initially those sounds
Mm,
capture your attention. Eventually, you habituate. You habituate to the sound of your own breathing. Evolutionary value in that, because otherwise you'd go nuts if you could hear that
right.
every single second. But we also habituate to rewards. So if you are changing your own future, make sure that what you're proposing to your audiences is even more desirable than what they used to do in the past.
We have gone through attention, we have gone through memory, we have gone through different stages of memory. What are still some myths or things out there that drives you crazy when you hear it? We talk about goldfish and all these other things. What other things that's out there that's pervasive, but then it's like, no, if you look at science, is not what's happening.
I love this notion of using neuroscience to debunk myths. Here's one that drives us crazy in neuroscience, which is simplicity is better than complexity. Less is more, some people say. First of all, in terms of sustaining attention, less could quite often become a bore because if there isn't really that much to look at, then I'll find a phone, I'll find something else to look at. There is no shortage of stimulation these days. What I'm noticing in all of the neuroscience studies I conduct, no exception, the brain synchronizes better with that which is complex across time compared to simplicity. The only thing that must be simple in your messaging and your communication is your 10% message. There's one main message, like we said, build like the world is watching, 3 or 4 supporting points. That's simple. I can grasp it. The rest of the 90, and I hope that all of you find this as good news, must be complex because otherwise, how are we going to stay there? I'm going to find some other things that will bring me some novelty, will bring me some intriguing viewpoints, will bring me that notion that you're talking about earlier, which is, oh, I haven't really thought of looking at this way. So rediscover your relationship with complexity. Remove the phrase, let's simplify complexity, because your audience's brain will stay with you longer and will want to return when your message is complex in a managed way. Sometimes people have a lot of complex things, but they will come to the brain as randomness. It's not complexity that really gets you in trouble, it's randomness. When you have something that's complex, but now you're still enabling your audience's brains to see pattern, still come back to that 10% message. So there's the same iteration again and again. People will stay with you in a way that's fruitful and in a way that they still remember things after 48 hours versus being overwhelmed by complexity.
That is so good. It goes back to, as you were asking me about binge watching TV shows.
Yes.
If there was a show that is not complex, that is just surface level, who's going to watch for 8, 12, 16, 24 hours?
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
no one is going to watch it. So I think what you say is so profound, Carmen, because it's not simple, not complex. It's actually simple and complex.
Yes.
How I'm hearing it.
Yes.
You need to have the simplicity of the 10% message because you need people to remember that. You need people to go back to that. But then you need the layers and the depth of the 90% to make that come alive, and people will stay. That is very, very, that is
You
very, very
summarize
true.
it perfectly. So besides, if people like simplicity so much, your audience's
Yeah.
brains, could they appreciate your simplicity unless they knew the complexity from which it has come? Get them to even appreciate your efforts for showing them the essence, and they can only do that if you dare to go there. And the metaphor that
Yeah.
I quite often like, and I think you'll enjoy it, here's a way to even trigger your own memory at point B. Next time you go to a grocery store and you see those heads of cauliflower or broccoli, but imagine a cauliflower. When you look at a head of cauliflower, you see that even the smallest head of cauliflower at the top retains the exact same properties as the entire head of cauliflower. Or next time that you see a tree, for example, notice how the very smallest branch of that tree retains the exact same property as the full tree itself. This is called fractals. You'll see them anywhere in nature. They simply mean these elements that retain their properties regardless of level of magnification. So in your messages is not all that different. The moment that you have your 10% message that has a set of properties, so to speak, a small head of cauliflower, and the more you go around and around and around, and now you have your 90% and you go back to that 10%. It's essentially cauliflower all the way down. So that's how you
Yeah.
know that you have managed complexity well, that regardless of the abundance of information in your 90%, it's still
Yeah.
cauliflower all the way down.
How you make complexity manageable
Yes.
is through organization and structure,
Exactly.
not by removing complexity
Yes.
and just making it super simple. This is
Yes.
not going to serve you well.
Exactly. Yes, you summarize it just perfectly. Don't simplify, help the brain manage complexity well.
Carmen, I feel like your students are so lucky to have you. Your clients are absolutely lucky to have you. And I'm so blessed to be able to speak with you. And thank you so much for coming on the show. Now, to tie it all up with a bow, which what we agreed on earlier in the show, if you had a sticky note to put on every marketer, business owner, entrepreneur, what would it say on that sticky note?
The sticky note would definitely say control your 10%, because when you do, and when you create memories in people's brains, you will definitely help them to make decisions in your favor.
Thank you so much, Carmen. I'm going to put all her books, everything that you need to find her, to follow her in the show notes. Thank you so much again for this amazing session.
Same here. Your audience is lucky to have you, and I really, really enjoyed our conversation. And if we do the test and we ask people after 48 hours, what do you remember? I'm hoping that control your 10% is going to be the phrase that comes to your mind, because it will serve you well.
Wasn't that such an amazing conversation? I mean, I love geeking out with Carmen. I mean, she's a double PhD. She knows more than I can possibly know about memory and attention, but man, I do love this stuff. So if you think about the 10% message, we've repeated that over and over again, right? It's all about understanding that 10%. And then you can go about disseminating it, telling the story, helping it come alive. In my recent episode, I shared this controversial battle between data and story. It's called story selling versus data selling. Which one will win? If you're interested in that, go click on the link right here. Or if you're in your podcast player, you can look back. It's like 4 episodes behind. I will see you there. It's story selling versus data selling.